I'm photographer David duChemin, and this is Vision is Better, a sometimes weekly podcast about the craft and art of photography. Welcome here. Welcome back. This is Vision is Better, episode 60, and the second of what I imagine will be a two-part series about exploring, beginning, working through personal projects. In the last episode, I encouraged you to pick a theme and start before you had it all figured out. That's the biggest takeaway. There are no rules to this. This stuff will look different for you than it will for me, but the stall for most people is starting the damn project. Start your project. You don't have to have it all figured out. The camera is an excellent tool for exploring. So pick up your camera, go out, begin just exploring, all right? Make a bunch of photographs to see what really works for you. And then, as we mentioned in the last episode, you're going to want to impose some constraints. Choose some of the conventions you might want to apply to the work. Maybe that's a particular color treatment. Maybe it's black and white. Maybe it's a specific lens or an aspect ratio, a POV. Maybe it's a specific time of day or a specific location. Whatever it is, the more intentionally chosen and I hope, appropriate for your theme, the better. Now I want you to tighten things up even further, and I'm going to suggest that you give yourself a deadline and a deliverable. So let's say you choose to photograph the characters at your local pub. You go in a couple times, you kind of get familiar with it, people got comfortable with you, and the formal portraits that you wanted to do somehow maybe turned into something, more environmental or candid. Now narrow it down. Is it, for example, going to be color? What kind of aspect ratio or framing? Make the choices that they're not always going to be tight constraints. Some projects will benefit from one constraint over another, but make some choices that make sense for this project and then stick to them. For example, are you going to use natural light or artificial? That might be one constraint that will help you creatively make some decisions. So maybe you decide you want it all color because the pub itself has a really interesting color palette, but you're going to go with natural light. So you're getting there. Now you've got some constraints imposed. Now I want you to go even further. Here's what that might look like. I suggest writing it down. So I will take my iPhone or my Moleskine notebook and I would write, let's say we call the series Drunk. Drunk will be, this is what I write, Drunk will be a series of candid and environmental portraits made at the local pub, the intimidated liver. The final collection will be 24 color images eventually printed and exhibited at the pub by next December, by which, after which cirrhosis will have taken us all. So now you've got a clear sense of the theme. You've imposed some constraints, you've got a deadline and a sense of how you'll present that final project. Those final deliverables are important because they're going to determine how you shoot the project. If you know that it's going to be printed and it's going to be printed large, that will determine the kind of photograph you make. If it's going to be printed and there's only space for horizontal images or there's only space for vertical images, of course that will determine the work as well. So now you're going to refine the work. And this happens as you photograph, as you're working. As you work, you'll see which images are easy to make, which ones are harder. You'll get through the low-hanging fruit. You'll get some images which are just sketches and you need to go back and you have to work on them time and time again until you really refine them and they get where you want them to be. And you'll start to get a sense of where the holes are and where you need to fill some of the things to give it a little bit of a rhythm. A personal project that's just all one type of photograph is less interesting, especially if you've got 24 images that you need to make for this series. You want a little bit of a rhythm. So now that you've got that, now you want to start daydreaming a little bit. You want to start, I don't go in with shot lists and stuff, but maybe you want to ask yourself, what would, if you could get any 3 shots for this work, what would those shots be? Perhaps you're missing part of the story. Have you photographed the bartender? Why not photograph him when he first comes into work and is setting up or after the last customer's gone home? What about the guys that deliver the beer and always come in later for a pint? Why not photograph them as well? I never begin a project with shot lists or storyboards. That doesn't mean you can't. Again, there are no rules. But I like to see where things are going organically, at least at first. So I just go in, I make a bunch of images, but once I see what's possible, then I start making lists and seeking out the opportunities that might take a little bit more work to make. You keep working it. Don't settle for the first shots you get and just call them your best and move on. The longer you spend doing this project, the more familiar you'll become, the deeper your understanding and the greater your insight, and the better the work will be. So you keep working it. Give it as much time as you can afford to give it. You start fast, but work long. Then you're probably going to want feedback. So first get feedback from the work itself. Always first from the work itself. Is the work cohesive? Is there a good rhythm to it? Do you have enough variety to keep me, as someone who maybe has never been to this pub, interested and invested in the characters? Do the images work individually as well as together? Do they have emotion, or do they tell a story? What about someone who's never been to the pub? How will they respond to these images? Right? Are they universal enough to interest other people? Print your work, live with it, study it, and when you're ready, maybe choose a couple people that you trust to run your eyes over the work and give you some feedback. You know, help you see the blind spots. What have you missed? Which images particularly resonate with them and which ones don't? And find out why. And then lastly, I'm going to suggest you deliver on time. If you want this to be successful, don't procrastinate. Get out there and make the images. You've got to do the work. That's the secret to creativity, is doing the work. And if you don't have the motivation, perhaps it's a project that it's not for you. It's not the one that you first thought that it was going to be, and it just isn't lighting the spark, and you need to change your constraints or the direction of the theme. That's okay. But life is too short to be creating work that you yourself aren't interested in. And it's way too short for me to spend my energy looking at work made by a photographer who's just mailing it in. Then once you've done the work, and I think this is probably one of the most important, they're all important, but once you're done the work, get it out there, share it. If you had every intention of exhibiting it, exhibit it. The work is not done until it's done. So exhibit it, print a book, give out prints. Blurb.com or Artifact Uprising make fantastic photograph books that you can do, even if it's a one-off, even if it's one or two. Maybe you give one copy to everyone at the pub, whatever it is. Get it out there, get it into the world, get it up on your portfolio. So often we think our work is done when we've shot it, edited it, put it through post, and got it on Instagram, and then we just we're done, we move on. It's not done yet. Get it on your portfolio, submit it for publishing, or consider awards that you can enter a body of work into, and then start thinking about the next one. I read a lot of material about writers and how they write, and one of my favorite writers says, his name's Stephen Pressfield, who wrote the book, The War of Art, and he said the day he stops writing his last book is the day he starts writing his next one. He doesn't want to lose momentum, all right? So start thinking about the next one. While you're shooting that previous, the ongoing project, be thinking then. You're going to get ideas coming up as you shoot, and they're going to tempt you to change the work. Sometimes that's a good direction to go in, but other times it's just something you need to write down in your notebook as an idea for future work, maybe a follow-up body of work. Maybe this is just the first expression of that body of work, and those new ideas will be the next thing you start. But do start a second project, start thinking about it, start the sketching, start the daydreaming. I'm going to finish by showing you images from another body of work, one of my ongoing personal projects, Underwater. This is an open-ended project that it keeps growing based on my love for the ocean and my desire to explore it, specifically larger pelagic creatures. But as you watch it, ask yourself, is it cohesive? What were my constraints? Does it have variety and rhythm? Does it clearly explore an idea or a theme, or is it kind of all over the place? Remember, for your own work, there are no rules. How do you want to do this body of work? What do you want it to be like? That's it for personal work. I'm sure we could go deeper, but what I'd rather do is leave it to you to begin working on your own projects. The comments, of course, are always there, and you can leave questions. You can tell me how it's going. I am imagining that I may actually do episode 61 as a question and answer. So if you have questions about personal projects, if you have thoughts that you want to bounce off of me, I can't guarantee I'll get to all of them depending on what the response is, but leave those in the comments below. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're not already subscribed, don't forget to do that. Please do leave a comment, and remember, gear's good, but vision's better. Take care.